Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of State of Mind. This will be part 34, the second half of chapter 21. The next morning in homeroom, Aizawa verified that they would be proceeding with their work studies. Izuku went through the rest of the classes that day, wondering how he was going to approach All Might to ask about Night Eye. It would be the first time they'd be seeing each other after his retirement the evening before, and Izuku felt things would be different now. He felt like the weight of the world was riding on his shoulders. The end of the class rolled around, and Izuku sent a text to Yagi, asking him to meet him in the teacher's lounge. Izuku made it there first, making a pot of hot water for tea, and then grabbing 2 mugs from the cabinets, pouring him and All Might both a cup. Izuku would have preferred coffee, but with the state of his mind at the moment, he felt that it was probably a bad idea to add caffeine to the mix. Yagi joined him some time later and sat next to him instead of across from him, tugging him into a side hug. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you that I was retiring yesterday when I saw you, my boy." "It's okay," Izuku murmured. "I understand. I just need to be stronger. The world is going to need strong heroes now with you, the pillar, gone." "While that's true," Yagi began, releasing Izuku, "you should focus on your studies. I don't want you to feel too pressured or stressed to replace me just yet. There's time." Izuku shook his head. "I disagree. I don't think there is time. Which is why I wanted to ask you to contact your old sidekick, Sir Night-Eye, for my hero work studies. I feel that he would be a good option for me, since I'm sure he knows about One for All." Yagi's eyes widened, and he looked at his successor incredulously. "How strange that you mentioned Mirai. He called me for the first time in years last night, after the conference." Yagi sighed, leaning back into the couch and looking at the lights in the ceiling. "I'll talk to him, young Izuku. But you should know, he disagrees with you being my successor, and he has strong feelings about it. I have no doubt that should he agree to employ you, that he would be hard on you." Izuku nodded. "That's fine. I can take it." Yagi frowned but nodded. "I'll call him tonight and see what he thinks, and then let you know in the morning. Meet me here tomorrow after class." "Okay," Izuku said, standing up. "I'll see you tomorrow, then." And with that, Izuku left Yagi alone, the hero bending forward to place his head in his hands. As promised, Izuku headed up to the teacher's lounge after class, surprised to meet up with Togeda, heading to the same place. "Togeda?" Izuku asked, tilting his head. "You're meeting All Might too?" Togeda asked, and Izuku nodded, frowning in confusion. They entered the room together and found Yagi sitting on a stool in his powered-down form, standing once he saw them, gesturing for them to sit across from him. It was strange seeing him in his true form with someone else around. Izuku wondered how it felt for Yagi, if it was uncomfortable. "Young Togeda is currently doing his work study under Night Eye," Yagi explained once they had settled. Izuku straightened, glancing at the blonde next to him. "Really?" he asked, brows raised. "Yup, I've been with him for a year now," Togeda explained, throwing a fist up. "Getting to the point," Yagi said, narrowing his eyes. "Do you think you could introduce young Izuku to Night Eye, young Togeda?" "I see. So this is what you called me out here to talk about." Togeda slammed his fist into his palm, smiling before moving to wrap an arm around Izuku's shoulders. Izuku immediately ducked out of the way and slid to the opposite end of the couch. "Don't touch me," he glared through his hair. "Sorry about that." Togeda waved his hands in apology before looking back at Yagi. "Why use me as the middleman?" Togeda asked. "Sir would be happy if you talked to him directly." "I spoke to him," Yagi said. He wants you to introduce young Izuku and get your thoughts on him. Speaking of, what are your thoughts on young Izuku? Well, Togeda dropped his hands, thinking. He suddenly looked at Izuku. What kind of hero do you want to be? Izuku leaned back, blinking. What kind? He frowned deeply, looking down at Wink. What kind of hero did he want to be? Did he even know? I want... Izuku lifted his head, staring Togeda down. I want to be the kind of hero that people can rely on to help them. I want to be the kind of hero that children and adults alike can look up to. Izuku considered his father, his fire, and his fists, and then his mom and her shaking form as his father yelled at her. Izuku straightened, inhaling sharply. I want to be able to inspire others to fight back against their aggressors. Togeda grinned down at Izuku, and Izuku squared his shoulders. It took saying it aloud, but Izuku finally realized what kind of hero he wanted to be. Not one exactly like All Might or anyone else. Izuku wasn't going to replace him. He was going to be even better. He needed to be. Togeda tossed him a thumbs up. All right, there's no reason for me to refuse. I'll introduce you to Sir. Izuku sighed. Thank you. Togeda nodded. I don't know if he'll accept you, though. Across from them, Yagi snorted. I doubt young Izuku will give him much of a choice. Izuku smiled wryly at that. It was the next day that Izuku met with Togeda, and they took a 1-hour train ride to Sir Night-Eye's agency. He wore his regular UA uniform as well as the gloves Aizawa and Mike had gotten him. But otherwise, his arms were bare, and he didn't wear a scarf. All of his scars were uncovered for everyone to see. Izuku had spent an extra 10 minutes that morning taking in his appearance, the crisscross scars on his cheek, the large reddish scar from Handyman across his neck, and all of the burn marks and scars all over his arms. He didn't know what to think about his own appearance anymore. Izuku approached the agency with Togeda, his older yellow bag slung across one shoulder. He hadn't brought Wink, thinking it would be better to leave her at the dorm. If you don't want to be turned away, Togeda started, as they climbed up several flights of circular, wrapping stairs. Then before you finish talking to Sir today, you need to make him laugh at least once. Izuku looked at the third year dryly. Me? He asked. You're asking me to make someone laugh. That itself is amusing. Togeda laughed. I'm sure you can do it. After all, you just made me laugh. Izuku's steps faltered on the next stair, and he almost tripped, watching Togeda's back. Why are you being so nice to me, even though we just met? Togeda glanced back at him, one eyebrow raised, eyes shining brightly. I don't feel like I'm being that nice to you, though, he said, looking back in front of him. I wish I could help you more, but from here on out, you need to figure out how to get Sir to acknowledge you on your own. Here we are. They finally reached the end of the stairs and entered a hallway, stopping in front of an unassuming wooden door. Sir is behind here. Izuku sighed, resisting the urge to bite his nails. That wouldn't exactly be a good first show of his strength. Togeda stepped forward and opened the door for him. Izuku stepped into the room and was immediately alarmed by the sheer amount of All Might fan merchandise in the room. His first thought was that all the stuff must be worth so much money for food that he would have been able to survive on it for the rest of his life. He took in the sight of the hero behind the desk, the man looking up when he caught sight of Izuku, standing up and coming around to stand in front of it. Well? He asked, crossing his arms. Izuku surveyed the man. Immaculate green and yellow hair, yellow eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses, and a disapproving look on his face. His suit was perfect too, not a single wrinkle or stain to be seen. Izuku immediately did not like him. He seemed like the kind of man to shove his place in life and his wealth in others' faces. "What do you mean, well?" Izuku asked, adjusting his hold on his bag. Night Eye stepped forward, looking down at Izuku as if he were a petulant child. Izuku was getting really tired of being so short in stature. "So, you want to do your work studies here to become stronger?" Izuku resisted the urge to say obviously. He really disliked this man. Night Eye sat back down before going on, droning on about the hero work studies and what they meant for Izuku. Izuku tuned him out. He'd already heard this whole spiel from Aizawa. He tuned back in when the hero asked for the contract he'd brought from the school. Izuku slid it over to him while Night Eye eyed him, almost as if confused. He pretended to stamp it, and Izuku watched him with a distinct lack of amusement. Night Eye's aura took on a perturbed edge, which Izuku secretly enjoyed. If he could ruffle the feathers of such an annoying man, then he was doing something right. "I understand the merits in working here for you, but what about for me?" Night Eye said, tapping the stamp against the table infuriatingly. Izuku scowled, his lip curling up. Of course he would ask that, selfish bastard. "I offer my quirk and intelligence, as well as my experience. I've dealt with a lot of different scenarios, and I react well during times of trouble." For the most part. But Izuku wasn't going to mention his crippling anxiety and PTSD. "I scored the first 100% on the provisional license exam, if that means anything." "Actions speak louder than words," Night Eye said, coming around to face Izuku. "You have 3 minutes to take this stamp from me." Izuku narrowed his eyes, his mind immediately racing with ideas on how best to retrieve the stamp. No lava rain. He couldn't destroy the office. If Izuku grabbed him with state of mind, Night Eye would take the stamp with him. Izuku straightened, considering that maybe that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Izuku could summon the stamp itself back right out of Night Eye's hand. He'd never tried something like that before, but he believed he could do it. Plus, he had a whole mindscape of random things that he could use to combat Night Eye's predictive quirk. Night Eye had Toga and his sidekick exit the room, and then started the time. Izuku tossed his bag onto the ground and removed his gloves, throwing them onto the bag. Night Eye twirled the stamp in his hands, his eyes calculating behind his glasses as he watched Izuku. Similar to how a bug collector looks at bug carapaces, a scientific curiosity, and nothing more. Izuku took a deep breath, willing one for all to his body. Then he began moving, jumping from wall to wall like Gran Torino, not even trying to make a move on Night Eye or the stamp. He himself had no idea what he was going to do. He was making his body move faster than he could think, letting it act on instinct and training alone. That was the way to overpower Night Eye's quirk. Anything could happen. Izuku reached into his mind and pulled out the first sharp object he could find. A butter knife appeared in his hand, and he flung it at Night Eye, who easily dodged. Izuku darted forward as the knife embedded itself in the wall, just left of All Might's face on a tapestry. He swiped a leg out to knock Night Eye down, but he dodged that as well. He aimed a punch at the hero's groin, but the man stepped back, pointing a calculated look at Izuku. Izuku flung another butter knife at the man as he jumped from wall to wall. It bounced off behind Night Eye and clattered to the floor. Then came a dish rag, a broken mug, a roll of tape, a first aid kit, a partially destroyed cat toy, all of them missing Night Eye as he dodged expertly. The last thing was a spoon, the same one that he'd tried to offer Aizawa a couple days before, and it managed to hit Night Eye's hand, irritating the man. Izuku jumped again, ripping the tapestry off the wall and flinging it at Night Eye without thinking about it. This was Izuku's first truly thoughtless move, and Night Eye did not expect for Izuku to use anything from within the room, especially the merchandise, and especially when he had a seemingly endless amount of things in his mindscape. Night Eye was effectively blinded for a quarter second by the tapestry, and Izuku flew forward, green lightning lighting up his eyes ominously as he stretched a hand out. His left hand knocked the tapestry away, just as the right closed around Night Eye's throat. And then he was gone. Izuku landed heavily against the office desk and backflipped off of it onto his feet. His breathing slightly heavier, Izuku lifted a hand, focusing on the stamp. Just like he'd thought would happen, the stamp appeared and Izuku stepped forward, pressing it down onto the paper and then setting it down next to the paper. The door suddenly burst open, and in ran Toga, who was grinning madly. "You got him, didn't you? I heard that sound. The ripping sound like when you got me." Izuku nodded, picking up his bag as he summoned Night Eye back, the hero dropping onto his feet and straightening. He glanced at the desk and paper with his seal on it. Izuku watched him, almost smugly. Night Eye looked irritated, like he hadn't expected this to happen, which Izuku supposed didn't happen to him very often. "You will realize who that power really belongs to during your time here," Night Eye practically growled, eyes alight with anger. Izuku pulled himself to his full height. "I already have," Izuku said. "It belongs to me, and don't you dare claim to know differently. After all," Izuku took a step forward, eyes burning with anger and dedication. "I'm the one that spoke to Nana herself, not you. I'm the one that endured torture rather than give it away. I'm definitely not going to now because some All Might fanboy doesn't think I should have it." Behind him, Toga's jaw dropped, and in front of him, Night Eye blinked at him in absolute shock, before throwing his head back and laughing loudly. Izuku glared at him. He wasn't trying to be funny. He was being fucking serious. "All right, then," Night Eye said after getting a hold of himself. "I'll see you Saturday at 8 for your first day." He waved dismissively, and Izuku returned to Toga, who was looking at him as if he'd suddenly grown another head. "I can make it back on my own," Izuku said, and pushed past the third gear, going back down the long flight of steps. Izuku listened to music on the return trip, glowering at everything. Sir Night Eye had put him in a bad mood, and it wasn't until he had gotten back to his dorm room, changed, and collapsed onto the common room couch with Wink that he began to feel some semblance of normality return to him. Shoto appeared and dropped onto the couch next to Izuku. Izuku moved his eyes up, looking at his friend. "Night Eye agreed to the work studies," he sighed, petting the cat who was loafing on his chest. "He really sucks." Shoto raised a brow and Izuku scowled. "I had to fight him to get his approval, but he obviously doesn't like me, and all because he doesn't think I'm the right kind of hero." For one for all, but that part went unsaid. "I threw a butter knife at him too," among other things. Shoto gave Izuku a weird look. "Why do you have so much cutlery in your mindscape?" He was thinking about how Izuku had told him about offering Aizawa a spoon for his coffee one time. Izuku shrugged. "You'd be surprised by the things I store in there. I never know what someone might need." Shoto smiled, leaning against the side of the couch to look down at Izuku more easily, turning so that his ankles were touching against Izuku's head. "Show me something weird that you've got in your head," Shoto said, resisting the urge to lean down to pet Izuku's long hair. "You mean aside from the bomb?" Izuku asked, completely even-toned. Shoto blinked. "Aside from what?" Izuku laughed. "I keep forgetting to return that to May. I should do that." Shoto nodded wordlessly. "What would happen if it exploded in there?" Izuku frowned, his hand stilling against Wink. I should return it to May as soon as possible." Shoto nodded, and Izuku pulled himself into a sitting position facing Shoto, Wink settling back down on his lap. Okay, so something weird. Izuku tapped his chin before smiling and lifting a hand to hover between them, palm up. Shoto watched as Izuku's brow furrowed slightly as he focused, and then a small purple plastic bag appeared in his hand. Wink shot up from his lap and began meowing and pawing at Izuku's hand. "Is that catnip?" Shoto asked in surprise. "Yeah, Wink goes crazy for the stuff," Izuku answered, and then sprinkled some on the floor. Wink jumped down and literally dropped her entire body into the small pile Izuku had made, smashing her face into it. Some of their classmates began joining them, dinner being made by an angry Bakugo, the only one in their class that had failed the provisional license exam. He was definitely bitter about it, but Shoto hoped that it taught him something about being nice to other people, especially if you were rescuing them. Eventually, the entirety of 1A was either in the common room or the kitchen eating dinner, which never happened. Usually they all tended to get their food at different times. Shoto waited for chaos to ensue. It was Ashido that broke the calmness, shouting that they should all do something after class the next day, since it was a Friday. Izuku sat up, slurping noodles into his mouth, his curiosity piqued. It was probably a good idea for him to do something before his work study started. He imagined he wouldn't have a lot of time afterward to hang out with his class once Saturday rolled around. "That's a great idea," Kaminari agreed from the kitchen table. "What should we do?" "We could always try the mall again." Izuku wasn't sure whose voice that was, but he found his head shaking and his hand going to his throat, his fingers skimming the scar tissue. "Anywhere but the mall," he whispered, and the room went silent. Shoto patted Izuku's shoulder. "Yeah, probably not the mall. We could go see a movie," Ashido wondered out loud. "Laser tag." Tokuyami was surprisingly the one that offered that. "Yes." Bakugo dropped his bowl onto the table, and it clattered. "All right. Everyone all right with laser tag?" Ashido asked, pulling out her phone to book a time. "What's laser tag?" Both Shoto and Izuku asked at the same time, and everyone turned to look at the two of them with various levels of confusion and sadness. So that was how Izuku found himself in a dark room the next day, targets on his body and a laser gun in his hands. His palms were sweaty, and he was still kind of confused as to what was actually going on. But as he soon found out, it was fun, and Izuku's competitive streak reared its ugly head and he fought for victory, taking down his classmates left and right as he dodged lasers and vaulted walls. He was eventually taken out, in the first round, by Aoyama, who, unsurprisingly, seemed to know his way around lasers. After that, though, Izuku knew to be careful of his sprightly classmate. Shoto and Izuku teamed up in the second round, and Izuku found that Shoto was not very good with guns. "I never needed to train with many weapons. Father said they were redundant when we have quirks as strong as ours," Shoto explained, taking cover behind a tall wall. Izuku hummed in response. "Maybe we should get Snipe to do some training with us. I'm sure it could come in handy one day." Shoto and Izuku ended up being taken out by another teamed-up pair, Yaomomo and Jiro working well together. Bakugo ended up winning that round. The third one, and last, is the one where Izuku finally won, taking out Tokuyami as the last person and raising his arms victoriously and smiling. The rest of the class congratulated him, and they left the laser tag building, deciding to stop at a cafe on their way back to UA. Aizawa and Mike were both with them, since they were supposed to have a staff member with them at all times when they left. Aizawa had been none too happy with Izuku when he'd returned on his own after seeing Night Eye. They almost stopped at a reptile cafe, Sue wanting to visit her favorite snake, but there wasn't enough room to fit their entire class. So the two heroes split up to accompany both groups of students, Mike going with Izuku's group. It seemed his Entomophobia made him very wary of a lot of different creepy crawlies. Izuku's group headed to a cat cafe, the same one that Izuku had come to with Shinso, what felt like so long ago. Craving something sweet, Izuku ordered the sweetest thing he could see, which ended up being a bright pink drink with sprinkles and candy in it. When he sat down with it, both Shoto and Shinso looked at him with barely concealed disgust. Mike sat down on the ground with his coffee near Izuku's feet, cats immediately crawling all over him, while the voice hero laughed gleefully. He was in civilian clothes, jeans and a plain white t-shirt, his hair in a messy bun. Izuku was dressed in his usual galaxy leggings with light blue shorts over them and his black skeleton astronaut shirt. His hair was down and fell in waves and curls over his shoulder. Izuku eventually moved down to the floor next to Mike, and Shoto joined him at his side, their shoulders touching. Mike was jabbering on to Jiro about something to do with sound waves and what they could do depending on range and pitch. Across from them, Ida and Ochako were talking animatedly about her own work studies, which were also starting Saturday. Shinso was playing with a group of cats while Ashido took pictures of everyone. Izuku could feel his phone in his pocket going off non-stop as he imagined Ashido was sending every picture she took into the group chat. Sato and Ojiro were discussing fighting techniques while kittens treated them as living jungle gyms. Everyone was so happy, so comfortable with each other, so at ease, and as Izuku looked around, he found his eyes stinging with tears. It felt like just yesterday that his life was a hole in the ground for people to either ignore or step over. It wasn't that long ago that every day was pain and loneliness. He felt like he had come so far in just a short time. He belonged to something now. He wasn't alone anymore. Izuku actually had friends, something he hadn't thought possible a year ago. "You all right?" Shoto asked from his side, tapping the back of his gloved hand. Izuku looked up at him, noting his concern and care, and he inhaled deeply. "I'm okay. I don't know." Izuku glanced around at everyone, and Shoto nodded. "I know what you mean," he said, and Izuku leaned back in relief, glad that someone could understand what the heck he was talking about. Shoto leaned in closer to Izuku, offering his warmth as comfort, and Izuku leaned in as well. Nearby, Ashido not so surreptitiously snapped several pictures of them and sent them to the group chat. That night, Izuku stayed up far too late with his classmates playing board games. At one point, Ochako asked how Izuku got his nails to look so nice, and he'd immediately pointed at Shoto, seemingly to everyone's surprise. Ochako begged Shoto to paint hers, and then all of a sudden it was a nail-painting party. Everyone was gathering their nail polish, if they had any, and bringing it down to the common room. By the end of it, almost every person in Class 1A had painted nails, even Shoji, who'd gone with a dark blue color. Izuku's were just a repainted yellow, but Yaomomo painted Shoto's a vivid red, like one side of his hair. By the time Izuku went to bed, he was exhausted, but happy, for the first time in forever. So much had happened lately. With All Might's retirement and the shit show that was meeting Night Eye, that Izuku was just so tired. He was ready for a break. He felt like he needed a break. But he had a feeling that Night Eye was not going to be taking it easy on him. And ultimately, Izuku was happy for it. He would prove himself to the hero no matter what it took. He would do it at least for Yagi, even if Izuku himself did not like Night Eye at all. Izuku fixed his nook up and snuggled inside of it with Wink, trying to fall asleep and hoping that he wouldn't have nightmares. He doubted his first day at the Night Eye agency would be easy. Nothing ever was with him, and he needed as much sleep as he could get. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 21 of State of Mind. Chapter 22 will be up next. Drop those thoughts, comments, reactions below. We get the confrontation with Izuku and Night Eye taking place. A little bit different than canon in this one, right? So Izuku using his actual original quirk, as well as going through the motions of imitating Gran Torino, kind of like what happens in the canon material as well. And then we also see some bonding between Class 1A folks, some of that taking place, some really nice soft moments, some fluff that's going on, just that peaceful happiness that, Izuku really kind of deserves, but maybe wasn't getting enough of. So that all got to take place, continued bonding between Izuku and Shoto. So thoughts, comments, reactions, let me know what you're thinking. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.